Good morning, students. Hi. Today we are going to uh, be going through the second lesson in our propaganda unit today, and so yeah, I'm been pretty excited for this one. This one is going to be focusing on the American perspective. But before we do all that, I figured we would get a little bit more of an introduction into propaganda. So if you would go uh, to your Google Classroom, you'll see this worksheet right here, and this is what you'll be filling out. Because we're going to be playing a game called Hero, Victim, or Perpetrator. It's going to be a kind of a fun activity today. Um, and so this is the worksheet you'll want to have with you as you go along. But let me just kind of explain the game first, or the activity. So what Hero, Victim, or Perpetrator is. So basically, um, you all are going to be given a set of images, and you are going to be guessing whether you think the people or a person in the image is a hero. So, are they a good guy? Are they heroic? Are they a victim? Were they victimized? Were they hurt by something or somebody? And also, or the other option would be, are they a perpetrator? Which basically means, are they the aggressor? Are they hurting somebody or something? And so there's going to be 7 total images that we're going to be going through, and some of you might recognize some of these faces, some of you might not. That's okay. But you're going to go ahead and make your best guess on each particular photo. So here's kind of an example right here. So say we have photo number 1, right? You're going to put a check mark or a dash in whatever category you think that photo represents. So if you think it in photo number 1 that represents a hero, then you'd put it right there, right? Or if it's a victim, right there, perpetrator, right there. Remember, perpetrator is the aggressor. They are the person who is hurting something or someone else. And then finally, after you decide which one you'll put down, you will write down in this box why you think the people in that photo, the person in that photo, is a hero, or why you think they're a victim, or why you think they're a perpetrator. Uh, Basically, just want to get your thoughts here on these particular people. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Hero, victim, or perpetrator. All right, here we go. So our learning target today, the direction we're headed, the students will be able to understand the American perspective of World War II by analyzing primary and secondary sources. So today, all these images are primary sources that we'll be going through, which basically just means they are original photographs, and they are without any context. So those are primary sources, and then the information presented afterwards is what you consider a secondary source, because I wasn't there to to tell you guys or what actually happened. And these we just know this information from history textbooks. So that's why we'd call it a secondary source, or but basically with me, I'm a lot further down the line, but we just basically go by primary and secondary sources. So because anybody who wasn't a part of the event is that'd be a secondary source. So basically, so yeah, we're covering the American perspective, but before that, we're going to be going into this game, hero, victim, or perpetrator, and that's what actually this particular lesson will be going over, and just kind of being able to analyze primary sources for clues to decide whether they are a hero, a perpetrator, or a victim. All right, here we go. So, photo number 1. Here we are. All right. So, hero, victim, or perpetrator. I'll give you guys a moment to glance over that. See if there's anything you notice about the picture that might point to a certain direction. Okay, now that you have been given a chance to glance over that photo, go ahead and choose, and then just write briefly why you chose that. All right, photo number 2. So yeah, that's photo number 1. Photo number 2. Here we are. Okay, so again, hero, victim, or perpetrator. What do you think? What are some observations you can make about the photo? Remember, we've been doing this, we've been covering this all year long. You guys know how to find those clues in the picture that might lead you to a certain suggestion of um, what side this person may lie on. So remember, use the clues. All right. Now that everyone has had a good look at that, go ahead and mark down on your paper or on your Word doc just if you think that or that they are a hero, victim, or perpetrator. If you chose any one of those, why? Why did you choose that? Okay, now that we've done that, we go ahead and move on to photo number 3. All right. So this photo, based off what you see, again, remember we're looking at details. Hero, victim, or perpetrator. All right, now that I give you guys a moment for that, just go ahead and write down why you chose what you did. All right, moving on. Photo number 4. All right, here we are. Hero, victim, or perpetrator. Remember, look at those details. Obviously, I guess you could say heroes, victims, or perpetrators here. But yeah, what do you think? What do you notice about this picture? All right, now go ahead and write down why you chose that, or why you made the choice you did. All right, give you one. Let's look about this one because this is kind of a more complicated image. I'll give you guys about 20 more seconds on this one. All right, go ahead and moving on. Photo number 5. Okay, hero, victim, or perpetrator. What do you guys think? All right, I'll go ahead and write down why you think that. Why? All right, moving on here. Photo number 6. Is this a hero, victim, or perpetrator? Or obviously, heroes, victims, or perpetrators, I should say. All right, go ahead and write down why you chose that particular answer. All right, moving on to our final photo. Here we are, photo number 7. All right, is this a hero? Are these heroes, victims, or perpetrators? Or is there a particular hero, victim, or perpetrator that you notice? All right, go ahead and write down why you chose that. All right, so at this point you should have this whole chart filled out here. So let me go back to the chart. Remember, you're supposed to put a dash on the one that you thought it was. And then, or I guess you could put slash mark, just something to signify that you chose that one. And you should have an explanation as to why you chose that. All right, everybody have their answers? Good to go? All right, here we are. So, answers. So, really the purpose of this activity, I mean, I'm pretty interested to see how you guys did and what your thought process is just based off these photos, because people say, you can't judge a book by its cover, and that's definitely true in images as well, because images can be portrayed in a variety of ways, and so we'll see how you guys did in getting the answers right or wrong. Okay, so again, photo number 1. What did you guys say? Just things I noticed about this photograph, right? They look pretty pretty peaceful, they look like just normal people. There's a man in uniform. There is one of those, but they look pretty happy. They have some dogs. It looks like look fairly peaceful, and they look like they're really enjoying themselves. They're somewhere looks like pretty nice. They're enjoying themselves. But so some of you probably already know this because you recognize the guy in the image, because it's a pretty recognizable face. So this was kind of a softball for you guys. But that man in the picture is Adolf Hitler. So Adolf Hitler, well, pretty obvious perpetrator, definitely not a hero, not a victim, a very wicked man. So he was the leader of Nazi Germany. If you didn't already know, but you probably did already know that, was responsible for the Holocaust. He wrote Mein Kampf, which is his personal book in which he expresses hatred for the Jews among other groups. He was responsible for the genocide of the Jewish and Gypsy people. He was a leader of the Nazi Party in Germany, and he was a member of the Axis powers who opposed the Allies. The Axis powers included Italy and Germany and Japan. So definitely perpetrator, kind of a softball for you guys there. Adolf Hitler, yeah. Okay, but he does look pretty peaceful. There's pictures of also of Hitler shaking hands with little girls. So a picture does not say everything about a person. That is for sure. So we know he was a very evil man. Okay, photo number 2. Okay, so things I noticed about this one, right? Same uniform Hitler's wearing, right? You see the swastika right here. But it might surprise you to learn that this was no ordinary Nazi. This man's name is Oskar Schindler. I don't know if you guys have heard of Schindler's List before, but it was a movie made back in the 90s by Steven Spielberg. And it was about this man, Oskar Schindler. So Oskar Schindler was a member of a Nazi party, but he had sympathy for the Jews, and he ran an enamel and ammunitions factory in Poland, where he employed over 1,000 Jewish workers. And he kept a lot of them out of the concentration camps by keeping them in his factories and bribing Nazi officials off. And he actually ended up spending, because he was actually a fairly wealthy man, and he spent all of his money on bribes and items on the black market to support his workers, his Jewish workers, and he's responsible for saving up to 1,200 plus Jews throughout the course of World War II. So pretty impressive, and he saved them from concentration camps. So hero. He is regarded as a hero for sure. Okay. Photo number 3. This guy. I mean, you can see it looks like he has a gun. The guy next to him has a gun. They're not wearing helmets, though. They are not. They could really be anybody, but these are Jewish resistance fighters. So you could say they were heroes because they were fighting against the injustices of the Nazis. They really weren't like necessarily too big. They were just kind of carrying out smaller attacks on Nazi targets, but they were important throughout the course of the war. There was a small amount of uprisings throughout the war by Jewish people, and one of those included the Armed Rebellion in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1940. Resistance fighters were backed by Polish forces, but were defeated by the Germans and were sentenced to concentration killing camps. So that did happen. So lots of uprisings did end up in death, especially at concentration camps, where many would try to escape, but not get too far. But guys like this, though, a lot of them were not just operating necessarily in cities, although they were a lot of the time, but they're also operating out in the woods, attacking Nazi supply trains and other things like that. So there was an armed resistance. It was a little bit harder to do in the ghettos because they just didn't have access to weapons. And then, these resistance groups were called Jewish partisan groups, and they were operating in Poland mostly. So here. Okay, photo number 4. I think this one's probably the hardest one. If you didn't know your history like super in depth throughout the 1930s, but you might notice right in the middle here, this guy. Who's that? That's George Washington. Right, George Washington, right? And what are these? They are American flags, right? But what about this and that? Swastikas. Some of you might be wondering what in the heck George Washington is doing next to a bunch of swastikas. Well, let me tell you. Back in the 1930s to the 40s, there was something called the German American Bund, and this was a Nazi American affiliated group where these people fed the flames of racism against Jewish and other minority groups, and they walked with the Nazi message. So it was led by Fritz Julius Kuhn, known as the Führer of America. So, like, Adolf Hitler was called the Führer, right? As in like king or supreme leader, right? And this guy was known as the Führer of America. They ran training camps for young boys to train them up to be Nazi soldiers, or to potentially send them over to Germany. They basically had these Nazi Boy Scout troops that that German families used to send their kids to. Not all of them, but some did. They held large rallies. They spread the Nazi ideals of hate and prejudice. They held a rally in Madison Square Garden once in New York City where 20,000 supporters showed up. This really frightened the American public, and they were scared that the Nazis were so close because people did not like the Nazis. Because the Nazis were starting to make a name for themselves over in Europe, and people didn't like them. This group was largely rejected by Berlin. The Nazis never really actually affiliated too much with these guys. They mostly stayed away, and this group was kind of more of an extremist group. But they did fly the Nazi flag and the swastika. And they held George Washington as the first fascist, is what they believed, because they thought he said democracy would never work. I don't know if he quite meant what they think he meant by it, but that is why you see George Washington here in the middle. Interesting fact. So I would say a perpetrator, because they definitely held a large part in discriminating against and trying to hurt the Jewish American people, among other minority groups in America. All right, for number 5. All right, here we go. So this right here, I noticed something right here. This guy is Japanese. This guy is wearing he's a pilot in the American Air Force because of his coat, his hat. That's another Japanese soldier. You can tell by the hats there, and the uniform. So this right here is a victim because he's being taken prisoner by the Japanese. So let's see here what it says. Say so. Basically, when you were taken by the Japanese, there was numerous places you could go, but you definitely didn't have a choice in it. But there were kind of two main options I wanted to point out. There was this one place called Unit 731, where the Japanese would take I'll explain it first. It was also called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. It's basically code for we're going to commit mass war crimes on our subjects here. They would take Chinese people, Chinese civilians, and also American prisoners sometimes, and just try out all different kinds of crazy drugs on them to see the effects on them. Very dangerous drugs that would kill the victims, or they would even dissect live victims. So they do things like open up someone's stomach and and try various things to improve or hurt the human body. They tried different diseases on these people. They did horrendous things, and they were responsible for many deaths and war crimes, especially and they were tried well after the war for those. And so another route was also the Japanese prisoner of war camps, otherwise called POW camps. And in these POW camps, the prisoners of war, the Americans who were captured by the Japanese, they fell victim to abuse, malnutrition, and torture. If you want to know what malnutrition is, it basically means that you don't eat enough, you don't sleep enough, you don't drink enough, so your body basically decays, and you become very skinny and frail, and your bones become very weak. This happened to a lot of the people in the Holocaust. It happened to a lot of Americans prisoner of war camps. And if you want to see a little bit more about that, it depicts it in Unbroken, the movie. Okay, this one right here. Some of you probably recognize this guy. He's a pretty famous dude. His name is Joseph Stalin. This picture here, he looks pretty peaceful. Looks like he's having a good time, smiling. Yeah, this guy was not a very nice guy, and you'll see why. So definitely perpetrator. He was the supreme leader of Soviet Russia. He took over in the late 20s. He was responsible for the killing and genocide of his own people. This guy was paranoid out of his mind, literally, and he would just kill anybody he thought was going to plot against him. And towards the end, he definitely thought that his whole country was against him, so he was killing many people. He called for earlier on in the 30s. He called for rapid industrialization of his country, with strict quotas demanded of the workers. So they had to have a bunch done. Basically, they had to produce a lot. If they didn't, they were executed or imprisoned or tried as enemies of the state. So very fierce iron rule. and his name, Stalin, means man of steel. So, and he definitely lived up to that for sure. His paranoia caused a great period of chaos called Stalin's Great Terror, in which any and all who opposed him or his party, or were suspected of doing so, were sent to Siberian labor camps, where in all 750,000 people were killed, one way or another, by execution, or they died working, or with the cold, or many other things, many other factors. Many people died under Stalin, his own people too. His wife committed suicide after abuses from Stalin, in which he reported her death was caused by appendicitis. Not true. She took her own life, but yeah, he didn't want that getting out, so he reported it falsely. His son was captured early on in World War II and was offered a prisoner swap. And Stalin said, thanks, but no thanks, because he probably gave himself up on purpose to avoid me. So he didn't take his son back. And then his son died in a prisoner of war camp later, because the Germans treated the Russians extra harsh in the prisoner of war camps. The Russians did the same to the Germans. Those sides did not like each other at all. Capitalism and fascism do not go well together, and they clash a lot, so that's why. And as, of course, the Germans, the Nazis were fascists, and the Soviets were communists. So, and then he was a key opponent of capitalism. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that makes you a perpetrator. It was just extra fact. That's all I'm stating. Just extra fact to say about Stalin. He definitely was a perpetrator, though, with all the acts he committed against his people and his totalitarian regime. All right, photo number 7. Okay, so here, a couple things. If you've ever watched anything World War II, you recognize the helmets here of U.S. soldiers. All right, you recognize kind of the webbing and the style of helmet, and also this kind of heart right there, the white heart on their, or like the white spade on their helmets, and that's their gear. This guy, you probably recognize his face. Might have been too far away for you guys to notice, but that is Dwight D. Eisenhower. So I would call him a hero. At least I call him an American hero. And here's why. He was a general of the United States Army in 1944. He was the supreme commander of Allied troops at the end of World War II. He was nicknamed the Desert Fox. He was the 34th President of the United States. And and by the way, short tidbit, he also was responsible in large part to the highway and freeway systems in the United States that happened under him. And he led the Allied invasion of French North Africa, Tunisia, and was and so that's kind of where he gets the Desert Fox from, in which he won both those from the Italians, who had control of North Africa. And he was also the commander of Operation Overlord. Sure, you heard of that before. In other words, the invasion on Normandy Beach and D-Day. So again, so he was the supreme commander too of the Allied forces, and he was also vital in the Battle of the Bulge, which was a key turning point in World War II for the Allies, in which the Germans were trying to hit back, and they gained some more ground, but then they lost the Battle of the Bulge, and America was able to move towards Berlin, and we got there just after the Russians. All right, so that's all I have for this particular activity. But I hope you guys were able to learn something about images. See, throughout these images, you might have been right on all of them, you might have been wrong on some of them, or maybe all of them. But it can be hard to tell just based off an image with no context if someone is good or bad. It's very hard to tell. And that's why recognizing propaganda is so important, and recognizing the use of it and how people use it. Because people like to use images to portray someone in a bad light, or to portray someone in a good light, or someone or something in a good or bad light. That is commonplace, especially in World War II, and people will do anything to generate awareness for their cause and generate a certain viewpoint on their cause. So it's important to be aware of propaganda and see it for what it is, and not take pictures as 100% true, at least how they're presented. So hopefully this activity was able to kind of show you guys how images can be construed, or how we can kind of have a bias towards certain pictures in certain people just based off what they're wearing or where they are in the picture or how the picture was taken. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope you learned, um, yeah, just something about propaganda today.